We have a question from Grant. This is not our Grant. This is another Grant. He writes, "Hey, FHB podcast. I'm an avid listener and all access member. Thank you, Grant. And I apologize for the long email. My wife and I bought a house 2 years ago in the Huntsville, Alabama area. We love the area and most things about the house. We plan on living here for a while and want to make some improvements along the way. We've already put in a lot of sweat equity with a few projects like a new kitchen, bathroom cabinets, a laundry room, painting, and landscaping. I've had one long-running project of fixing the crawl space. We had a few problems come up that didn't show up in the home inspection. I found black mold around the registers. No problem. I told myself I can handle that. I put in a humidity monitor in the crawl space and noted that we were normally sitting around 80% to 90% relative humidity. So over the course of the past 2 years, I've been working on encapsulating the crawl space. I dug a perimeter drain around the inside and put in a sump pump. I also did a foundation drain around the front half of the house, back half to follow soon. I put in a dehumidifier and closed all of the vents except for one, where I have a small fan for venting radon. I can now keep the crawl space about 57% to 62% relative humidity. The radon levels are safe, and I'm happy that I can build from here. I recently completed a full soda blasting project to remove all the mold around the crawl space. That was a very satisfying project. Now things are cleaned up in the crawl space, and I'm ready to start laying down the plastic and seal it all the way around. All that to say, I'm not afraid of big projects that take a lot of back-breaking work. Now to my actual concern. Actually, I'm just going to stop for a moment here with this letter because it is long. And Josh, I just thought you reflecting on your course, you'd take a pretty good dive into crawl spaces and how to, make sure that they're healthy and working properly. So before we go on, from what you hear from Grant, is he doing everything right in this crawl space?
Yeah, I mean, he really is. Starting at 80, 90% is no joke. He had some serious water issues coming from somewhere. I mean, it goes back to the heat, air, moisture thing, right? So where is that water coming from? And he's dealt with it by closing those crawl space vents, right? Because there's water in the air, and if it can get into the crawl space, then stopping that is great. So he's done that there. Creating the interior perimeter drain, great. If there was any standing bulk water or hydrostatic pressure, he's reduced that now by running that off to a sump pump and running that out. And then, it sounds like he's half done putting the French drain around the outside. He's doing all the right stuff. And he also mentions too that he puts a dehumidifier down there to get some active dehumidification going. Again, I would have recommended that, and it seems to be making a difference. It's at 57 to 62% relative humidity currently. That strikes me as being a little bit high, but he does mention that he hasn't put down the plastic yet and sealed that to the wall. And I bet you that's going to make a big difference because the relative humidity of the ground anywhere on planet Earth is approaching 100% relative humidity, and it's going to want to drive from high to low. It's going to want to go from the ground into that crawl space air. So if he puts in that plastic polyethylene sheet, that is a vapor barrier. It's going to stop any of that vapor from coming up. I'd be willing to bet that he's really solved that problem. He's done a really nice job with that.
Yeah. Great. And Grant, we would, we'd love to hear after you get your plastic in and get it all sealed up and monitor the relative humidity for a little bit. We'd love to hear back from you on that and see what the levels are. Okay. So he goes on now to my actual concern. I recently found a section of my wall that appears to have had the rim joist removed because of rot or something. Apparently the previous owner decided that they didn't need to put one back when they ripped out the old one. There appears to be a small fragment of one they put in. It sounds like some remodeling was done there, maybe as an attempt at a repair. I sprayed some foam in a hole so that I could seal it for now. Then I decided to investigate. I started to rip off the vinyl siding where the rim joist was missing. I wanted to see how easily it would be to slip one in from the outside. I found some old pressboard siding underneath the vinyl and a good bit of rotted wood. I figured I can deal with these things, but what I'm really concerned about is the fact that I appear to have no sheathing on the house, just some polyiso insulation board. I poked with an awl in there a bit, nothing. Well, there is some insulation. I fear I have reached the kick it over and run point. My question is this: am I overreacting? I had some crazy plans about extending the upstairs into some of the attic space and putting in hardwood flooring, but now I'm not sure this house is worth it. I have no WRB, no air control layer, not a lot of lateral strength, I'm assuming. I'm sure there's bracing somewhere, but who knows? If houses need to breathe, mine will have no problem. It probably breathes better than Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps is the swimmer, right? I read A Pretty Good House, and my goal was to put some love into this house and make it the best that I could rather than building new. But all of my remodeling plans now include a huge cost of adding sheathing to the exterior. It just seems like a mess, like I should break my back on some other house. P.S. I want to clear the air. I'm an engineer, and I understand if you don't want to respond. Well, Grant, we do want to respond, and let's start with your question about the rim joist. So, Grant, you recently wrote an article on floor framing, so this should all be top of mind for you. But can you tell us what the role of a rim joist is, and if you'd be concerned if one were removed and not replaced in a floor system?
Yeah, so the rim joist has a lot of different roles. Probably the primary one is it keeps the joist from turning over. So traditionally it runs perpendicular to the travels or the span of the joists. They're nailed, hung, however that may be, generally nailed through the end, through the rim joist and into the end of the joist, and that keeps the joist from tipping side to side. The other thing a rim joist does is typically it helps spread the load of the bearing walls, the exterior bearing walls that sit on top of it. It helps bridge the gaps between the joists and almost acts as a solid member. In some floor systems, you can actually beef up your rim joist and use it in place of a header, which is pretty cool. Mike Girton has some stuff on our website about that. The other thing I would say in this case, and looking at Grant's pictures, is a rim joist often is also the place that a ledger attaches to the house. And it looks like he has a deck that's attached up against this section of the rim joist. In terms of tipping over, that can be solved with blocking, generally, as can the bearing of the walls above it. My concern in his case would be the attachment of the ledger. Is there something there that ledger is attaching to? That would be my biggest concern in terms of him not having a rim joist. However, it's definitely something it's actually easiest to address from the outside. It's probably the only way to address it from the outside. I've done these. I did one. I think we put pictures on probably 6 months ago now on an episode. But it's definitely something he should take a look at, specifically as it relates to his ledger. Yeah, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think that if he's already gone to the degree of removing siding and exploring this area, and he has it opened up, that you're right, working from the outside, no reason why not to simply replace that area of rim joist that's missing. And I
should add one more thing a rim joist does too, is when you talk about the diaphragm of the floor, so basically its resistance to racking is the joist and the subfloor acting together as a thin beam. The rim joist and the end joist and the rim joist are quite important to bringing the subfloor nailing and tying that all together, which is why you generally nail more around the outside of the sheets and around the edges of sheets in subfloor. So that's another thing to pay attention to. I would say, and I'm not a structural engineer, but I would say that small section probably wouldn't feel a great effect of that. But if you removed a rim joist around the whole side of the house and didn't replace it with blocking or some other way to transfer those loads in the diaphragm, that's certainly important as well.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you guys think about the big question here? He is concerned that he doesn't have structural sheathing on his house. We know that houses can be built without structural sheathing if they're properly braced. If you were working on this house, if you guys were working on this house, if you're called, to do some remodeling, you realized that the house did not have structural sheathing. How would you investigate this, and how would you determine your plan for going forward?
This is an interesting one. Here in the west coast of the United States, we're in a seismic zone, and so you really couldn't build without sheathing, right? It's not something that I would stumble across all that often. But I do know it's a thing, and you're right about the lateral bracing. You can absolutely keep that going. But one of the things that sheathing does too is it acts as a solid substrate for placing one's water control layer against, and it also is something that you can nail your window flanges to and integrate them properly into the water control layer. And it's something that you can, attach your flashings and all that stuff too. Right. So not having that does make for a more challenging water control layer on one's house. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means that it's more challenging. Everything is on a spectrum, right? So, Grant has a more challenging approach here. So, you really got to get into the details and figure some stuff out. I'm looking at one of the photos and, near that rim joist, and I can see that the deck boards are bumped up right against the house. And so, back to that water control, it's like, well, let's, this is a more challenging situation. Let's bring those deck boards back. Let's give a little space between that ledger and the house to allow for some ventilation going back behind there and for any water to drain behind it. So I think things like that will be important. I don't think it would be a throw my hands in the air and sell the house and run to the hills kind of situation. I think it's just, it's going to be more complicated to attach your WRB and your windows and integrate that into it successfully, but it can be done with blocking and with some smart details.
What do you think, Grant? Are you tearing the siding off this house and putting sheathing on, and are you free this weekend?
Yeah, what's the next flight to Huntsville, Alabama, right? So I would say it's not a sell the house, run to the hills, give up problem. In my area, there's quite a few houses built without structural sheathing. Generally, what you find is either there's sheathing at the corners and other spots where shear walls come into play, and the rest is sheathed with foam, similar to what he has. We also have quite a few where people use steel lead-in braces. So diagonal lead-in braces, you cut a kerf in the studs, they get nailed, provide your rigidity. And I'm guessing that's similar here. It seems like this house isn't super old. It's not, from the 1800s. So, but I would say if the house is still standing now, you're probably fine. It's not going to fall over. Now, if you start ripping out lead-in bracing, it might eventually. But I would say you got kind of two options. It sounds like he's planning to do probably the windows, the cladding at some point anyway. So there's certainly an opportunity there to improve his enclosure. Mm-hmm. He could do that through sheathing the house. Absolutely. He could use a nail-based panel if you wanted to, add continuous insulation. But there's also quite a bit out there, and Building Science Corp has a lot of things on this, where maybe you're not going to sheathe the house. You might just replace your foam or add to your foam layer. This does certainly add some nuances. To Josh's point, cladding attachments can become interesting. Windows can become interesting. WRB, same way. It's all things we know how to solve for. So I would urge him to look into, if he's going to take over the outside of this house and he's going to do something to it, which it sounds like is what his goal is. You have two options. You can either sheath the house you can either sheathe the house. I shouldn't say sheathe the house, or you could kind of dance with who brought you, stick with the lead-in bracing, and go all in on foam on the outside of your house. And there's data that supports that works. It's just something that think through the details of both, and I think your decision will come to you as you look at both options.
If I can add to that too, I mean, not having the sheathing and having the foam throughout the whole house there is a nice thermal break on all of the studs in that house. And so, you could kind of take the, silver lining here and go like, oh, you know what? I've actually got a nice thermal break on this. Yeah. And maybe that's a check in the positive column.
Yeah. And in Huntsville, I mean, it doesn't look super thick. It's probably half an inch. It's usually what was used around here. But in Huntsville, it's getting close to enough to control condensation too. So, you're down there in what's that? Probably climate zone 2.
I looked it up actually. I was surprised. It's 4A.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, maybe I misspoke then.
They have a design temperature of like 26 degrees, so it gets cold there. So that was one thing I would be curious about is like how thick is that? Because I saw that it was foil-faced polyiso, and if it's not thick enough, it might not be keeping it warm enough, and that could be a condensation plane. So, Grant, your thought of maybe adding more insulation to it, maybe hold some water, to use a bad metaphor.
We don't want it to hold water.
Well, we have an article on how to build a house without structural sheathing that we will link to on the show notes page. And we can link to Josh's article on continuous exterior insulation, which will get specifically into how to determine, what you need for adequate R value of exterior insulation to know that you're not just creating, condensation issues inside the wall, and that's not where some of your rot is coming from. So we'll link to both of those on the show page. Thank you. Thanks, Grant, for writing in.